Hello, episode 15 Scottish Dad running. It's been 9 months since the last video, which is a bit wild and not intentional. Life just got in the way a little bit, as did running training. So it's the 25th of August. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's windy and pissing down with rain. Typical Scotland. And yeah, it's been an interesting 9 months. I've got lots to update you on. Lots happened over the last 9 months in terms of training, lots of lessons, lots of challenges. And last week I achieved a sub 90 half marathon. Sub 90 minute half marathon, which at the beginning of this journey seemed unthinkable. And I achieved it last week. And it's been a really good week since then. I've been running almost every day. And yeah, I'm going to share this video to bring you 5 tips which will cover off some of the journey of the last 9 months that I've had, some ups and downs, but mainly the successes and what I feel has worked really well in terms of progress and achieving certain goals, and ultimately achieving the goal of a sub 90 marathon, half marathon. So yeah, it feels weird to be filming again. I'm excited, I'm anxious. Join me shortly on my runs and I'll share with you my top 5 tips on achieving a sub 90 half marathon and give you an update on some of my journey over the last 9 months. Cheers! Tip 1. Bad runs happen. It's a huge lesson over the last 3 or 4 years, and more specifically the last 12 months, is bad runs do happen. And there's 2 parts to this. One is your day-to-day runs can be going great, and all of a sudden the motivation pre, during, after run just completely diminishes. Low in energy, poor times. There's sometimes logic to it. Not slept well, diet's not been great, stuff going on at home or at work. But also, sometimes it just happens. I can't explain it. My main tip is just allow it to happen. Don't get too downbeat about it. The majority of the time, if you're going out consistently, you'll be finishing runs feeling great, during the runs feeling great, pushing yourself. Don't let a bad run derail you. If you're running to a training plan, stick to it. It can be easy to sway from what your plan is or worry that it's not achieving your results, but most of these plans out there, or one you've created yourself, they're good. They're based on a lot of evidence and experience of people that have created them, so stick to the plan and accept that bad runs happen. And furthermore, if you're a more experienced runner or you're starting events, bad events can happen. I've experienced it. I had a really difficult Edinburgh Marathon this year, and I had a really challenging Kilomathon. Those were my 2 events pre the half marathon in August. They didn't go to plan and they didn't feel great. Fast forward 3 months and I've just run a sub 90 half marathon, a PB, and then on the same week a sub 19 5k. If you'd have told me that after the marathon 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed you. It's been a huge lesson just to stay consistent, keep getting out and stick to a training plan if you've got one. That's tip 1. Tip 2. Vary your training. So, vary your training. Really important. I found this has been really helpful for me to be more considered about the types of runs that I go on each week. In the past, I've been more focused on just running, just being out running, keeping myself fit, doing 5Ks, 7Ks, and rotating that through the week 4 or 5 times. The last 6 to 12 months, I've tried hard to vary training more. And when you hear that phrase like vary training, it doesn't have to be massively complex. And I've got a kind of wheel of 4 activities which have worked really well for me. But variation, I think, if you're going to run a half marathon, and particularly if you've got a time goal for a half marathon, especially at my level, and if you're looking to do a sub 90 for example, I think variation's banditry really, no way around it. My rotation of 4. Interval training, nothing complicated. There's lots of variations, lots of tools online that can help you put an interval session together. Generally speaking, it's 30 to 40 minutes, breaking down your sessions into slower paced runs and fast paced high tempo sprints, or 80-90% to max pace. Interval training, very helpful. Slow long distance running, another variation that's really important for longer distance running. A particular type of activity that I find difficult. I do get caught up with music and Strava and times quite a lot. I'm quite guilty of that. However, slowing yourself down, going at pace, a slow controlled pace I should say, it works you in a different way. It improves your aerobic capacity, improves your heart rate, and how that functions in the latter parts of a race, longer run, slow controlled running. Hard to do, but very important. Tempo running. So tempo run would be the opposite, I suppose. I find this works better when you're working to a timed goal rather than distance. If it's a 5 or a 10k that I'm going to run at tempo, I very often get caught up in previous achievements at that time, and I find it a little bit more difficult to navigate. So I try and focus tempo runs on time rather than distance. So if I'm doing a tempo run, I'll set it to 30 minutes or 40 minutes usually, one of the two, and I'll try and aim to run at a pace which would be close to my top pace of half marathon. And for a sub 90 half marathon, you want to run a pace at 4:15. So for my tempo runs, I was aiming to run less than that because it's a shorter time, half an hour, 40 minutes. So I would run less than 4:15 per kilometre. Sorry, I don't know what that is in miles. And I would try and navigate that over the whole tempo run at that pace. And the final one is hill sprints. Hill sprints, I'm in a hill now actually, but I'm not sprinting it. Hill sprints would be probably the least enjoyable part of my training, but although it's hard to quantify, I definitely feel as though I get a lot more fitness from those types of runs. So yeah, find a hill, run it 6 or 8 times. That's generally what most training plans will advise you. Crucial part of training. Next step. Tip 3, stretch. So tip 3, stretching. I've been a long time sufferer of hamstring issues, predating the last 3 or 4 years of running, going back to playing football from about 20 years of age onwards. I can't think of many games or training where I didn't have some sort of pain or discomfort in my hamstrings. There's a wider point to that. If you've got issues, you probably should seek some advice or guidance from a physio or someone maybe with a bit more experience in the running world, but I've never really taken that step. But what has really helped in the last 6 months or so has been stretching. So I've now got 2 parts to my training, 2 parts of my stretch training I should say. One is that I'll be more dedicated pre-runs and post-runs with stretching. Pre-run, that's usually a bit more mobile rather than static. Likewise, post-run, a little bit more fluid. Last kilometre of the run, I like to do a bit of a cool down now, which just softens the muscles, and I find personally reduces the inflammation or pains around joints and particularly my hamstrings. So stretching has become a really important part of my routine, and it seems to have made a benefit in terms of running at pace, feeling less strain when doing so. And then the next one would be yoga. So I mentioned about issues with my hamstrings. I've been quite consistent with yoga over the last 3 months or so, and then really ramped up my commitment to doing it over the last month to 6 weeks, trying where I can to do it daily. And yeah, the improvements have been massive. didn't quite think they'd be as impactful as they have been, but it's become a really important part of my routine. I'm running this morning, for example, and then I'm going to go home, do a bit of a cool down on the way back, and then do some yoga. I just use YouTube. There's loads of videos. I'm really inflexible, and there's ones for beginners that suit me, but the progress I've seen since starting the videos has been massive, and like I say, it seems to have helped my runs, particularly my longer runs where the kind of 25-30k mark, I would almost always start to get pain in the hamstrings and the glutes. That seems to have died down. So stretching and yoga for me has been really important, and a big tip for running a successful half marathon. Tip 4, run on a hangover. Oh wow, right, tip 4, it's really chucking it down now. Tip 4, run on a hangover. So that's a bit silly, but the wider point is about diet and nutrition. I'm definitely not saying go out and drink and run on a hangover. What I am saying is, I found personally minor changes and adjustments to diet are more impactful than major ones that I'm not going to sustain, and inevitably are going to impact my motivation because I'm not sustaining my diet. There you go, that simple. Stick to what you feel is manageable, and long term you can stick to it. Personally, haven't found that diet has a huge impact on success, but I have been more mindful and made minor adjustments where appropriate. If I'm running on a Saturday, maybe don't have a beer on a Friday after work. Maybe don't have a takeaway, and maybe be more considerate about what I'm eating that particular day. If I've got an event on the Saturday or Sunday, maybe have a considered week, lots of water on board, keep myself hydrated, be really considerate about what's going on in my body that week, and then a little bit more considerate of carb loading the 48 to 72 hours leading up to the event. But I say it jokingly about running a hangover, but you know, alcohol is an interesting topic because that is inevitably one that impacts training. It's almost impossible for me to avoid it sometimes socially, but I have, and I can vouch for this, Claire will vouch for this, anytime I have a drink, particularly if it's a big occasion, I always go out the next day for a run, every single time, no exceptions. And it's been pretty big change I've found, because alcohol, as we all know, can have quite an impact mentally on you. There's a lot of guilt carried over, particularly if you're training, and you'd be surprised what your body can produce when it's hungover, you know. So look, there's mental benefits there. If you can get yourself in a hangover, I'd highly recommend it. It's been a huge positive in my life and in training. But the wider point here is about diet and nutrition. For me personally, I've had success without making huge adjustments to my diet, and that would be my guidance. Keep it manageable. Fifth and final tip, run with other people. Okay, fifth and final tip, running with other people. So, as part of my training, it's been really useful, helpful to get out with different people. It's inevitable that you're going to be at different levels from other people. It's really difficult, I suppose, to be exactly at the same level as somebody else you go running with. And as I mentioned earlier, variety is really important. So that alone, you know, you and the others' varying abilities will naturally bring some variety to your training. And there's definitely an element where running with somebody else pushes you on, and that counts both ways. I've been on slow, ponderous runs and wanted to chuck it in, but continued for another 5k or so because somebody else is there and spurring you on. And then another example is you're maybe faster intensity paces with someone who's at a higher level than you running, which again pushes you on, or certainly pushes me on, and just forces you to be a little bit more motivated and stick with them. And you know, I've had some really successful tempo runs running with other people as well. You know, I like running on my own. I like my own thoughts. I like podcasts. I like switching off. But if I reflect on training and what's brought me a lot of success, it is running with other people. And there's a social part to that as well. You know, it's nice to chat with someone about, well, I guess, you know, life, but, you know, bringing it back to running, you know, good to share your experiences, what's challenges you've had, goals that you've had, and, you know, work through problems and goals, you know, vocally with someone. I think that's really, or has been really helpful for me and really useful. And that's it. 5 top tips for a successful half marathon. Hopefully a sub 90 marathon. And you know, look, my overall message would be, it's been difficult getting videos together for sure. You know, over the last few months. It's nice to get back to doing it. It definitely allows me to reflect on training. It's been a really good few weeks and months of training, but it's also had its challenges this year going further back. So, you know, regardless of all that, and regardless of it training and goals and successes and failures, you know, it's important to remember why you're running. For me, it's about keeping a kind of equilibrium mentally and keeping myself fit and active. It's just become a kind of important habit in my life. So yeah, you know, don't get too bogged down in training, don't get too bogged down in times, you know, always think about why you run. That certainly helps for me sometimes as well. Looking forward to the next video, not sure exactly what it'll be, but nice to do some reflection with you guys. Like and subscribe, cheers.